Good afternoon, everybody. Unlike perhaps our presentation from Raphael this morning, our doubt about the question, I love this question. The future and what it wants from us is very much in the domain that I live and breathe and work in at the moment, appreciative inquiry. And it's the sort of question we like because it's a fateful question. It's an open question, but not completely open. It sets you in a direction. And it means different things to different people, so we can have different interpretations, different framing, and so infinite possibilities. So I like this question, and in the end, I didn't say I leapt at the chance to talk to you today, but I thought, yeah, this is an interesting topic. I like it. So I've thought about this a lot, and my feeling is that although we have a systemic problem in the world today, in leadership isn't working, it's really a people problem, and we can do something about that. Our leaders are overloaded, and we can actually unload them. We expect an enormous amount from our leaders, and in fact, we almost expect miracles, and they can't do it. The future does very much depend on how well they function. Let's face it, there are always going to be leaders and followers. And so we do need good leadership. But if I had to just one answer to what does the future wants, it would be the future wants better. And the better has got to come from the people who lead commerce, commercial entities or nations. And a little bit later, I'll talk to you about national leaders, because I think we may be able to help there as well. There are leaders of commercial enterprises who still feel they've been paid an awful lot of money to know all the answers. And that's not quite fair. And in fact, we're not getting out of them what we should. I had an intervention with a client recently where they told me at board level, the senior management team had put in a new policy for delivery of care, because it's a national organisation looking after care for 3,000 people. And they said to put it in, and it's kind of very patchy the way it's worked. Some regions it's worked, and other regions it hasn't. Who actually has to deliver this program, this new policy? Well, the carers themselves, the people who look after our clients. And where did the feedback come from that you found where things weren't working? Well, mostly the carers, but also our clients complained, and actually the families of the clients complained. And yeah, it works some places, but where they do what they're told to do, but the rest found all sorts of reasons why they can't fill out all this paperwork and report all this stuff and so on. So I said, did you actually involve these people, these stakeholders, in creating this plan, this new policy? No. Well, could that be why it didn't work? We didn't have time to go out and consult with all these people. We knew what needed to happen, so we created the policy and we put it out there. And don't we hear that an awful lot? And of course, it doesn't work very well. And in the end, it takes much longer than if you'd gone out and done proper consultation with the people who are going to be affected by the change that they're trying to invoke. And this is, yes, a people problem, a leadership problem, but it's also a followership problem, and one that's got to be looked after. And we are privileged, aren't we, in that we have studied change, the theory of change and the philosophy of change. And we've all graduated from two of the highest seats of learning in Europe. And we have, I think, if it's not a destiny, some responsibility, and certainly the capability to help leaders start to democratize, if there is such a word, be more egalitarian, share the ownership of what needs to be done in their organizations. And we do this by, or we can start to use this by using positive and appreciative inquiry to reveal creative, sometimes provocative possibilities. It means the leaders have to let go a little and open up creativity, value opinions, and find what values are really in the organization rather than the espoused values, and allow independence of thought. It democratizes the family, the workplace, the community, wherever we do this process. and it promotes fairness to then foster engagement and ownership. There have been many instances where I think I've been on a journey myself, looking for the Holy Grail, and I've had advice, very good advice, and sometimes not such good advice. And I'm remembering Parsifal, way into his journey, being told by Gurney-mans that you shouldn't ask questions, makes you vulnerable. Only fools and spies ask questions. But appreciative inquiry is all about asking questions. And thankfully, my journey took me first of all to Trinidad, where I happened to go to breakfast in a hotel where I was doing some work and saw a gentleman sitting there, and so I went and asked him what he does and so on. And he says, I'm one of the creators of appreciative inquiry. And he set me on a journey. He invited me, in fact, to see an AI summit, which was absolutely amazing. The 4 dimensions we went through, 1,700 people, a whole government department, including the minister was there doing interviews. It all starts, if you see at 12 o'clock there, with a discovery process where already the leaders have decided what direction they want to go, but no more than that. Picasso, I think, said, before you start a piece of work, have an idea what it's going to look like, but only a vague idea. And so leaders need a vague idea, a vision, yes, of where they would like to go, but they might be surprised at what differences there might be in the final vision that comes from the people in the organization. And so we start with interviews, and of course there was situations where secretaries or janitors were interviewing the CEO, and the CEO was interviewing back. And it starts a revelation of real values and real pride within the organization. And these filter to the top, come back and discuss them in groups and start an aspirational process, which we call dreaming, what might be. And we have to free it, first of all, from constraining factors, and I'll come back to that. But you begin to envision positive possibilities for the future, which may not necessarily be grounded in the present and the problems which tend to be debilitating. One of the bad press that appreciative inquiry gets is that it ignores the reality of negatives and problems within an organization. No, it doesn't, but it tries not to constrain people's thoughts by that. It says, okay, I understand that you don't like this, but how would it look like if it looked differently so that was not such a problem? And how else might it look? And what more would you want? And so on and so on. So we develop positive possibilities. And so gradually we filter out of it with post-its and discussions at plenary and so on, a new design, a co-construction of what could be, what can be, and finally the destiny or delivery of that creation, which is a co-creation, not just of the leaders, but between leaders and the stakeholders in the organization. And it may be suppliers, it may be the staff themselves, it may be shareholders, everybody that you can get has a stake in the future of the organization. And I've put at the bottom there, it's scarf-driven. There's a lot of neuroscience in this. David Rock's status, consistency, autonomy, relatedness, fairness. We press all the positive buttons on that. It makes people feel in the 2 hemispheres and have that cross-processing of lively, creative thinking, which you don't get otherwise if you're grounded in the problems and the now and what we can't do rather than what we can do. Some of you might have read Strategy in Business for August, Art Kleiner's magazine for last month. The lead article was the blank check. I've written it the wrong spelling in deference to those who live the other side of the pond. They get upset if things are spelt right. But you start with a blank check, and Kraft have used this in the States, and they use it with their brands and with their country operations. And very briefly, what they do is they say, shoot for the moon. Don't worry about how much it's going to cost. What would it look like if you didn't have the constraints, the limiting resources of funding? And of course, when you take that constraint out, you think of all sorts of marvelous things. And the amazing thing is that when they fill out the amount on the check, because they have to cost it, the project or whatever it is, the initiative they want to make, when they fill out the amount and take it back to get it approved, it usually is approved because it's a great idea. It's not a half-baked idea at a tenth of the cost, which probably won't get approved. So it works very well. And the unlimiting of resources is a very important part of appreciative inquiry and a very important part of what we do. We soar when we do strategic planning. We don't SWOT, right? We take out the weaknesses and the threats from that operation. We look at the strengths, the opportunities, the aspirations and the results where we would like to be, okay? And can you imagine by doing that, you don't get stuck in that downward spiral of all the constraints that have held you back to that point. It's debilitating, it is constraining, it will never give you a bright and better future if you're always sitting in the present thinking why you can't do things instead of why you can do things. It's very powerful, and the whole business of allowing ownership of the process of planning a future in that you value people's opinions because they're the ones going to have to deliver it, they have a stake in it, and although they may not get adopted, nevertheless you have valued them, nevertheless you have heard them. And that makes an enormous difference. And you get you would not believe this unless you see it. Go to a summit perhaps and feel the energy in the room and the tremendous feeling of wanting to achieve and wanting to go there, which you're never going to get with a top conceived plan from a leader that's then communicated down with the best will in the world, with the best communication in the world, with the best internal marketing in the world. It isn't going to happen. So leading change is very much about liberating limiting resources, consulting all the stakeholders, and co-creating a better future. Co-creating a better future. Not somebody feeling he's been elected, hired, or promoted in order to know better than everybody else in the organization. Liberating the limiting resources, consulting all the stakeholders, and co-creating a better future. Now, can you imagine, forgive me if I give a couple of examples from this country, in the United Kingdom. We have Cameron, at the moment, our Prime Minister, who just after the Olympics, I watched an interview, which was very successful, and I think we're all very proud of how they went, was asked how he's going to make sure that the legacy of the Olympics is maintained in the schools and the communities. And he said, well, I think that I will, and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And most of us would think, yeah, well, he's hired, you know, sorry, but elected to do that job. He's the leader. But actually, that's impossible. It's got to come from the schools. It's got to come from the communities. And jointly, they've got to make a plan. And yes, you may have to write a check, but these guys can write checks. They pretend they can't, but they can write checks. They can cause checks to be written anyway. And there's another instance of his big society, which is stillborn. He talks about it, or used to talk about it, but it's never really happened because he hasn't consulted the people. It's just an idea in his head, rather than, when I say consult, I mean really collaborate with the people in creating a big society. In fact, most people see it as a joke. They see it, it's governments trying to get people to volunteer to do stuff that the state used to do, because then they don't have to pay the state. They don't have to provide the funds. And it's very divisive. A member of the cabinet, because he builds around him this team of people who also are supposed to do it all, know it all. Andrew Lanzi, health secretary, has just been fired. He had a great vision of what he wanted to do with the NHS. And it might have been very good. It was putting doctors in leadership, which actually is quite a good idea. But it wasn't the people's idea. It wasn't the nurses' idea. It wasn't even the doctor's idea. And it wasn't the people who are receiving the services, the patients' idea. He didn't actually collaborate with them with coming up with a plan, that he just had an idea of painting the picture that would give them some direction in order to go. So Barack Obama, I think, gave not just his nation, the whole world hope, didn't he? Enormous hope. And yet many of his ideas are stillborn because he's tried to do it all himself. And he may say that it's because of this political setup that he hasn't been able to do it. But if he'd got all those people behind him to want to change things, he could have changed things. It doesn't have to be all done through political votes. We, I believe, can help with this. I don't see that we don't have the stature as graduates over the last 10 years of two of the highest learning institutions in Europe to be able to go along to world leaders and talk to them about helping. We should perhaps think that they should know, but they don't know. They've come up to this elected office perhaps through all sorts of means and all sorts of reasons why they were voted in, but perhaps not because they collaborate well with other people in order to get things done. They very much had to do things themselves and be personal successes and listen to people, yes, but still do things. Produce documents like that, or cause the civil servants to write them documents like that, and then put it out for consultation. Put it out for consultation. Nothing changes at all. A few words here, a couple of pages there. That's not consultation. Real consultation is where you really involve with the people and collaborate in something that you want to see for the future. So, I'd be very happy to join anybody who is sort of like-minded to me. We all have different methodologies and we all have different views, perspectives and frames. But I wonder whether we have a destiny. It's certainly not an obligation, but perhaps a social responsibility, as we are privileged, to try and do something, maybe some pilots in communities, one country or another country, to show the power of really involving people in their future. Because if we want a better future, there are different judgments for better. What's better for me is not better for you, is not better for the person next door and the person up the road. Their measurement, metrics if you like, of success are different to mine and different to yours. But combined together, they get a chance to see what's in it for them, which they never get the chance for, or if they do, they tend to rubbish it if it comes from somebody else. And they are then expected to look for and see, well, what it means to me. A lot of hard work, voluntary labor or whatever it is, overtime, never seeing my family as I would like to, all these other things which are our own personal agendas and values. Thank you very much.